Hi, and good morning. So, today I'll be talking about whale depredation, thank you, and the federal perspective. So I have to be honest, I am using this presentation to sort of address two topics. I'll talk about data collection, and then also how we're working to incorporate that data collection and depredation information into the federal sablefish stock assessment. So this topic in particular, this presentation is going to sort of bleed into the next session where we discuss stock assessment application. So that's my disclaimer. So we have three primary data sources that are informing sort of federal data collection on depredation. And these are all fundamentally pretty different in the monitoring rates and then also how the information is collected. So we have the Longline Survey data, which is, again, this is a nice standardized data set. It's typically 100% monitored. We also then have some data from the commercial fishery, but this is at best partial observer coverage, and this is definitely not standardized data. And then last but not least, we have logbook data, but this is only tracking certain vessels, and I'll go into that in a few more slides in detail. So when we look at NIMS Longline Survey and the commercial fishery data, in its simplest form, we're really just tracking the presence of whales and evidence of damaged gear or fish. That's sort of our proxy for depredation in general. But I do want to point out that in both of these cases, again, we don't have someone that's staffed just to monitor whales. So if we're catching a ton of fish, it may be that they can't monitor for whales. The sort of monitoring for depredation is not the priority. It's counting the fish first. And so there are cases, especially with the observer coverage on the commercial fleet, where it just gets not tracked. So that's something I want to put out there. We've also more recently looked at investigating sperm whale presence as a proxy for depredation. And so this came to pass because, as you mentioned, there are times when whales are around the boat and they're not necessarily depredating. They may be feeding on discards, whatever it is. So is just presence a useful term for looking at depredation and for quantifying depredation's effect on CPUE? And I just wanted to highlight this result. This is from a paper that we are working on currently. And you have the depredation effect or estimate on your y-axis and then by management area. And open squares, just presence, and then tight circle, presence and evidence. And you can see here there is a difference in the effect. And so there are some cases when whales are around the vessel not depredating. So this could be used as, however, a proxy for depredation if you're not sure. So this is just something I want to highlight as sort of an interesting finding. And we've also looked at this with the commercial fishery data and found some similar results that indicate that there's a value to looking at presence as a proxy for depredation, but when there's evidence with damaged fish, you're getting a more solid estimate. So with regards to our logbook data, this is kind of a more complicated story. Historically, the federal logbooks have not tracked depredation, and this is really unfortunate because a lot of the vessels are not observed. So we just have no information other than whether or not it's an account from a fisherman, and this is a huge lost source of data. So there is now a proposed rule to modify these logbooks to track the presence of whales and also evidence of damaged fish or hooks. And the nice thing is that this is being done in tandem with the other major logbook data collector, which is the International Pacific Halibut Commission. And so they've kind of teamed up and added a new section to our logbooks. And I'll zoom in on this because I know this is totally not legible. And so they've added this new section where we're looking again at what did you see sperm whales or killer whales, and how many damaged fish and or hooks did you see? So this should go through, and we will have some more information. And then the big thing is, will they be able to get someone to spend time and look at this information? And that's sometimes the disconnect with some of the logbook data. It may be there, but you need to make sure that somebody is tracking this. Also, this section of the form is not mandatory. So this is hopefully fishermen will take the time to fill this out. And I think they will, and they do, because they want this information noted. So that's sort of the basic way that the federal government is looking at depredation and what we're doing to keep track of the issue in a fleet that is not entirely observed, and a big fleet that is too. So let me change gears, and I'm going to talk now about the sablefish stock assessment. So the sablefish is assessed Alaska-wide annually by the National Marine Fisheries Service. And there are three main data sources that inform the stock assessment. And we're lucky to have this information. So we have a trawl survey. We also have the Longline Survey, which we've discussed sort of in detail in a couple talks. And then we have the commercial fishery. And they're all number one. So three of these data sources actually are hit pretty hard each year by depredation. And this is a problem for the stock assessment. This is reducing the accuracy of a very important stock assessment that is then, of course, used to set quotas for the fishery. So with the Longline Survey, depredation may be depressing biomass estimates due to those artificially low catches. And then with the commercial fishery, you have this unaccounted for sablefish mortality due to whales. And these are both big issues. And so again, here is the Longline Survey, the stations that are sampled. And again, the Aleutian Islands and Bering Sea are sampled every other year, so they aren't able to take on Western Alaska in full each year. This shows just how common depredation is, and this is again looking at presence and depredation by sperm whales. Maybe a slight increasing trend since 1998. We have our estimated CPUE reduction, so this is what we've worked to quantify with statistical approaches. About 7 to 20% CPUE reductions when depredating sperm whales are present. Now jumping to killer whales, and this is broken out by management area. Again, you can maybe see a slight increasing trend in some of these areas. The red bars are the Bering Sea, where killer whales just hammer the survey and the commercial fleet. Here's where you see the more severe CPUE reductions, 54 to 72%. So currently, stations depredated by killer whales in the Bering Sea, Aleutian Islands, and Western Gulf are just dropped from the stock assessment. And so in some years, over 50% of the sets in the Bering Sea alone are depredated. And again, we're only sampling Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands every other year. So this is a major financial loss, this is a major loss of data. Now conversely, stations depredated by sperm whales in the Gulf of Alaska are included in the stock assessment, but we haven't adjusted for that. And so that's what we're working on now. And as, as we all know, this may be reducing the accuracy of the assessment. So let's look at what we've done with one part of the stock assessment, looking at the survey. And this is with sperm whales, where estimated CPUE reductions tend to be more consistent. So we've taken this step with sperm whales. What we did is we inflated catch by about 14% according to that average CPUE reduction. And we looked at the relative change in key quantiles on the stock assessment. And let me draw your attention to this 4% increase. But just by inflating the catches on depredated sets, you see a 4% increase in the projected spawning stock biomass, and actually an 8% increase in the ABC, or allowable biological catch. And that's the term that's then used to inform the total allowable catch. So this did have a significant effect on the actual assessment results by including this sperm whale depredation in the assessment. The issue here that we have, so this hasn't been done, this isn't finalized. This doesn't address that unaccounted for sablefish mortality due to sperm whale depredation in this commercial fishery. So you're only hitting sort of one side of the story, right? And this is where we're banging our heads against the wall, but we're doing the best we can to look at some of this on the commercial fishery. So what we have here is we've taken sort of this to the next step, and we are looking at some of the factors that might be informing depredation, or might be some of the environmental characteristics and fishery characteristics that whales are targeting. And so here this is where we're going with this. We've modeled the number of sets depredated in a smaller grid area according to some fishery and characteristics that were significant to our modeling approach. And we can predict the proportion of sets that are depredated in these smaller area grids. This is sperm whale depredation in the Gulf of Alaska. And then we can take that and estimate the actual catch loss per grid. And so what we have is the predicted proportion of sets per grid times the catch per grid, and then times these CPUE reductions. And we're getting these estimates of catch reductions on a more refined scale. And then we can look at this over time, and you don't see a major time, there's no consistency in this. And this is sperm whales in the Gulf of Alaska and killer whales in Western Alaska. And these are sort of estimated catch removals. And one of the big issues we have with the observer data is we think that the percentage of sets that are labeled as depredated is biased low. And so we've come up with a novel statistical approach to inflate that estimate. And this is something that you can't, I wouldn't necessarily use in a management process because this is a theoretical statistical exercise. But nonetheless, it sheds some light. And so we have these inflated estimates in black and the standard estimate in blue. And it's been useful to look at this both ways. So with the commercial fishery, so now we've taken this to the other side of this, and we've we've expanded stable fish removals due to whale depredation by adding in this fixed year catch, so about 6,500 metric tons from 1995 to 2014. And this is stuff that is very much in progress, so it's going to change as we refine this approach more. We're finalizing this manuscript, but there's still a ways to go. But when we look now at the effect of the commercial fishery depredation on the relative change in key quantiles on the stock assessment, we don't see sort of anything majorly dramatic. We have a slight increase in mean recruitment. ABC is maybe 2% lower, but this is nothing to write home about. And sort of bottom line is this additional mortality due to whale depredation on the commercial fishery does actually have a minimal effect on the stock assessment, whereas what we saw in the survey did have a significant effect. And so we're trying to figure out how to tease that out, if it's appropriate to include in the assessment, how far we can take this information. So that's what we're thinking about. That's it.